Hey, low-key listeners, it's October 28th, 2025, and tensions are mounting in the Caribbean Sea around Venezuela, where the U.S. is building up a military presence. To help us understand the historical, social, and economic and political context, we have Dr. Igor Acácio from Political Science to help us make it make sense. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So let's start with some of the basics. What is going on in Venezuela right now, and what do we need to know about the political system to put that in context?
Right. So Venezuela is right now what is regarded as an authoritarian regime. Some people are going to call it a hybrid regime. But you can't start talking about Venezuela without talking about, the past. Venezuela used to be a very wealthy country. It has very large oil reserves, lots of natural resources, and it had one of the most stable political systems until the year 1999. In the 1990s, there was a military coup attempt by this guy called Hugo Chavez, a lieutenant colonel in the army. And it doesn't succeed. He gets sent to prison, and eventually he gets incorporated into the political system, becomes president in 1999, and immediately starts reforming the institutions, passes a new constitution, and starts pursuing, kind of populist left policies, income distribution, creates a party base, brings in the military with his rule. And his successor is Nicolás Maduro, which is the current president of Venezuela. So this guy gets elected as a vice president. Chavez dies in office. He becomes the president. And after Nicolás Maduro takes office, then most people are going to agree that Venezuela is an authoritarian regime. And it's one with interesting characteristics. I tell my students that authoritarian regimes, they can be party-based, where the party is the main base of power. They can be personalistic, where there's a personality cult and the leader runs the whole thing. And they can be military-based, where the military is the main base of power of the dictator. In the case of Nicolás Maduro, is all of them. It's all of the above, which is why he's been able to hold on to power for so long. He's been president since 2013.
Oh, wow.
And the most recent iteration of this, though tensions with the United States have been up and down depending on the moment, the most recent iteration of this is twofold. One, the perception that the Trump administration has that needs to ramp up the drug war efforts. And second, that there needs to be a regime change in Venezuela, that Nicolás Maduro must leave office. Mm-hmm. That's where we are right now, as tensions are building up and there's a military buildup in the Caribbean.
Why would the U.S. care about Maduro's government? Why would we want a regime change?
So there's a number of things there. In the order of importance may vary based on who's analyzing this. Mm-hmm. But I'd say first, energy security. So Venezuela has the largest documented oil reserves in the world. And though we are going forward with energy transition everywhere, oil is still a very important resource. More recently, Guyana has been experiencing a boom economically because of its oil, and Venezuela has geopolitical tensions with Guyana, right? So Venezuela is very interested in this area called Essequibo. So there's a border dispute. Venezuela believes that area belongs to them. And it's surprisingly the area with most natural resources in Guyana. Then there's the issue of counter-narcotics. Over the years, we saw the rise of these criminal organizations in Venezuela, outside of Venezuela as well. But the one that comes to mind when you talk about Venezuela is Tren de Aragua. Right? And Tren de Aragua is a gang that started in the prisons of Venezuela. And it succeeded in consolidating its power with collaboration, at the very least, of the state authorities, of the government authorities. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the largest kind of drug trade organizations in Latin America, with associations with mafias everywhere, mafias in Brazil, mafias in Argentina. It's a very, very powerful organization that started during the Maduro administration, right? Then there's issues of migration and humanitarian concern. So Venezuela is experiencing a large-scale humanitarian crisis. The economy is not doing very well. It's doing horribly. Inflation is really high. There's issues of food security, which Maduro has referred to sarcastically as the diet of Maduro, right, where people are losing weight because they don't have what to eat, and that impacts migration. So Venezuela has lost about 2 million people in the past decade, going to different places. The U.S. is is a country that comes to mind, but it's not the one that hosts the largest amount of Venezuelans. Colombia is the one that hosts the largest amount of people, and of course Brazil, Spain, and Peru, and then the United States, right? And finally, there's issues of geopolitical competition. So over the years, Venezuela has, because of its rivalries with the United States, has established very tight relationships with U.S. competitors. Very strict, very intense cooperation with Russia, military cooperation, including economic cooperation and military cooperation with China, and in very straight ties with Iran, dating back to the Chavez administration. And then the final thing I'll mention about the U.S. interests, which we can't discard, is the issue of democracy promotion. So, and that dates back to, you can talk about the domestic constituencies of in the United States. There's issues with, the Venezuelan diaspora, the Cuban diaspora, and the idea that the United States should work in promoting democracy, particularly in Latin America, which is, geopolitically it considers its, and I hate to say the term, backyard.
Yeah. Is there internal opposition to Maduro?
Yes. Internal opposition to what's called Chavismo, right, and Maduro represents Chavismo, dates back to the origins of Chavismo. So there's different sectors of the society in Venezuela that will oppose that administration and really that way of governing, right? So in a way, Chavismo changed. It changed everything, right? So ministries in Venezuela are called ministries for the popular power of a certain area, say defense or agriculture or whatever. And the opposition has had different configurations over the years. You've had different individuals who have run for president or other positions. They have won at certain points. Now and that's what makes Venezuela an authoritarian regime ultimately, is that, you're going to have the opposition participate in the elections, but they have no credible chance of winning. Even if they get the votes or if they get the popular support, the incumbent is not gonna give power. And that's the most recent iteration with Maria Corina Machado. Yeah. Maria Corina Machado won the Nobel Peace Prize. She is currently in hiding in Venezuela, but has decided courageously to stay in Venezuela, right? She didn't leave. Several of the other leaders of the opposition left for exile. So Enrique Capriles, Leopoldo Lopez, Juan Guaido, and Maria Corina Machado, who has been in Venezuelan politics for a very long time, decided to take over that mantle and to not leave. So the idea that there is an opposition, and the opposition claims to have a succession plan, which would lead to a peaceful transition of power in case the U.S. decides to step in and remove Maduro from office.
Okay. You have laid out a range of tensions between the U.S. and Venezuelan government. I want to go through the different normal ways that these types of disputes and conflicts would be worked out. Because, what we're noticing is that our administration is going to a military solution, but I assume there could have been other solutions. So let's talk about that. What are the tools that could have been used?
Right. So the first thing about tools here is the tools for what, right? So the U.S. clearly wants policy change in at least two areas in Venezuela. First, its policy towards illicit drugs. And second, it wants the regime to democratize, right? And who wants Maduro gone?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you achieve those goals, right? There's a range of things that you can do. The U.S. has tried a number of things. So, in dating back to the Biden administration or even the first Trump administration, targeted sanctions, visa restrictions. The U.S. Department of Justice got involved back in the day, but even more recently, where Nicolas Maduro, there's a reward for the capture of Nicolas Maduro of about $50 million, if I'm not mistaken. There's, of course, resorting to diplomatic mediation, bringing in a neutral country or bringing in the United Nations. That has been tried back in the day, but never to the extent that it could have gone. And we can talk more about this later.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, then it's the security issues, and then there's a special range there, right? So what the U.S. is doing right now is too large to be a drug interdiction operation, which the U.S. has done for a very long time in the Caribbean and elsewhere in international waters. A lot of it was done by the Coast Guard of the United States, but the Navy got involved in that as well. But it's too much for that. But it's too little for regime change. It's not large enough. Like, so the U.S. couldn't deploy the resources that it has right now, the numbers that it has, and effectively change leadership in Venezuela. Right? They don't have enough people. Right?
They don't have enough people right now on the coast, or where do they, like, how, what is the likelihood that they could get enough people, or what would that look like? I think that's an interesting.
Right. So the thing that comes to mind when you talk about military operations to remove leadership, the U.S. has had a long history of intervention in Latin American politics, dating back to, say, Guatemala or my home country, Brazil, where, it never got to that. But in 1964, the U.S. parked a carrier group off the coast of Brazil to help the people who were pursuing the coup in 1964. Mm-hmm. Never happened. The coup won, and there was 21 years of military dictatorship. Mm-hmm. Now, the one that comes to mind specifically is the removal of General Noriega in Panama. Mm-hmm. And it was a successful removal of power of a dictator that had been indicted as a drug dealer, was involved in the drug trafficking. He had also been an asset of U.S. influence and power in the region back in the day. And you got to keep in mind that Venezuela is not Panama, right? So Venezuela has, about 10, 11 times more people than Panama, right? The Venezuelan army is 10 to 11 times larger than the Panamanian army. Oh, wow. So the scale of this is completely different. Venezuela is a huge country territorially as well. It has a large area of jungles and in areas where the U.S. military would have a very hard time operating unless it deployed a huge amount of people. And what we know from research on preferences of military deployment, U.S. military deployment, is that people don't want that. Like, let alone the elites, which there's the debate on whether the U.S. should be doing this, right. But the people don't want this, don't want boots on the ground in another forever war. Right? So, yes, removal from office in 1989 with Panama worked, but there's always the failures of the forever wars that followed in other parts of the world. And that's the kind of engagement that the U.S. would be getting involved in case it decides to pursue fully the military route. Then there's an intermediate here, and that's something that President Trump has talked about, which is it now has authorized covert operations of CIA or other intelligence assets in Venezuela. And what's the idea there? The idea there is, like, with all of that pressure and these assets, that there would be a removal of Maduro by the Venezuelans or with the help of some actors from the United States. That the population and some sectors of the elite, some sectors of the military, the security sector would would betray Maduro and remove him from office and
Yes.
starting transition of power.
Yes. Do we have a sense, and this goes back to the question about the opposition, the internal opposition, do analysts have a sense about whether there is enough opposition for that to actually take effect? This whole, we'll just provide some support, but really Maduro will be overthrown by his own people.
Right. So a lot of people have been dedicating their careers to studying why is it that the incumbent in Venezuela is not removed from office.
Yeah.
And I bring you back to the basis of power that Maduro has, and how it was able over the years to cultivate the loyalty of a number of sectors. Right. So I'm thinking of the military, and the military is a direct partner in ruling Venezuela. Right. So several active duty or retired military officers occupy key positions of power. So not only the Ministry of Defense, but they're governors and they run state-owned enterprises. They are directly related to Maduro in everything that the government does.
Yeah.
And it's hard to leave that, particularly with the potential for punishment down the road from their, because of their involvement with an authoritarian regime that torture, kills, and sends people to prison.
Right.
Right. So that'd
be a big risk for people, the military, to turn on Maduro.
Yeah, and it's also the case that, there's an entire other security force, which is the Bolivarian National Guard, which was created by Chavez to be able to be a countervailing force to the military in case the military gives up. So, and that's powerful in itself, and they're relatively well armed. And then there's a social base. So the political party, the government's political party, which is PSUV, is big, and it has a lot of members in society. And there's different networks of clientelism, of sponsorship, and of deliverance of public services that kind of keeps people loyal, right? Mm-hmm. So it has to, all of that has to work in removing Maduro, right? Because otherwise, if it becomes something partial, then we enter the potential of a civil war in a very large country in Latin America.
Yeah.
And where is the U.S. going to be when that happens is another story.
Yes.
Right?
Can we start going into that? Because I think one of the things that I always think about when there are talks of military action is, can it be isolated to that one region? I'd like to better understand Venezuela's like network of alliances within Latin America, and then further probe what you started getting into about their alliances with other global powers.
Right. So one thing that the administration must keep in mind when it pursues more aggressive policies in the region is that it may be getting these governments, particularly the Maduro administration, to operate on what's, house specialty in Latin America, which is anti-Americanism. It's always there, right? The idea that, well, once again, the Yankees are going to come in and they're going to do this and that, and they don't respect our sovereignty. So, and it props these leaders up, both in democracies, but especially in dictatorships where, people are struggling. They have legitimate reasons to be unhappy with the government, but all of a sudden, when there's something given to the government like that, where it's like, well, there may be an invasion, people rally around the flag. It's something documented in political science literature. Yeah. And neighbors have also been concerned about that, saying, well, there should be a mediated solution here. The U.S. cannot violate Venezuelan sovereignty by removing, even if it's a dictator, it can't do that. It's not the way to go. There needs to be some credible mediation. So that's the position of Colombia right now, which is, a close neighbor, but also, like I said before, a host of Venezuelans. Like historically, as Venezuela has hosted Colombians running away from the civil war back in the day. So like those are deep relationships, you know. But the same with Brazil, right? So Brazil now is trying to play a mediator because it's a credible actor with Venezuela. So the relationships President Lula has with Maduro are pretty close, and it's trying to establish itself as a credible actor to the United States, right? To get the United States to agree to some kind of mediation and really to reduce its military presence. I'm not even going to say de-escalation because it doesn't look like the Venezuelan military is escalating, right? I mean, yeah, they're doing some exercises and this and that, but that's kind of it, right? They're not sending troops and sending the Navy to patrol international waters. They're not doing anything like that, right? Then there's the international actors, right? It remains to be seen what's going to happen, particularly with China. China hasn't said a lot about this. Russia hasn't said a lot about this. And the idea there is both of these countries, you can say that they have territorial ambitions or territorial expansion ambitions.
Yeah.
So they're looking at this and looking at the U.S. Pursue more aggressive policies in its immediate region and saying or thinking, well, what if we expand to this area that we consider to be our immediate sphere of influence? Right, so that's where it gets interesting, right? Where we still don't know what these actors are thinking. There's not a lot of like stated policies about what's happening in Venezuela right now.
But this is something we should be looking for, right? As consumers of the news, what are we seeing China doing? What are we seeing Russia doing? And what are we seeing Iran doing?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. You know, I want to go back to this possibility that let me frame it this way. What's sticking to me is your insight that what the U.S. is doing right now is too much for patrolling drug cartels and too little for actual overthrow of the Maduro government in favor of a democracy. Are there other benefits or other things the U.S. government might be trying to do with the view of military bravado? I'm thinking about the economics, right? Like, you know, as you said, Venezuela has a lot of oil reserves. Right now, their main oil partner, are they selling those? Where's that going? To China?
Yeah, China, India, Cuba.
Yeah.
China, India, Cuba,
do we
Spain.
want in on that? Like, what else could we be doing here?
Right. That's an excellent question. So the U.S. has bought oil from Venezuela over the years, right? And that's until 2020. So there was a hiatus in oil sales. So they stopped importing Venezuelan oil, and it was only it only restarted, I believe, in 2025. Chevron was allowed to operate. And to send in oil to the United States. So, but never at the levels that it used to be, right? So we're currently at the levels of the 1980s, right? So there's a lot of room there if the U.S. would like to de-escalate, I guess, the issue, and would like to engage the Maduro administration economically, and not militarily.
Yeah.
But the risk there, and that's the big concern everybody has, is, well, if you engage the Maduro administration, then you're giving them more resources, and then they'll get a firmer grip on power.
Yes, that's a really good point.
Right?
Yeah. Are there, I know that one of your specialties is looking at the relationship between democracies and their military. So I am struck by Trump foisting up a military might right now. Is there something there with what Trump might be doing, not to sincerely overthrow the government, but something that this does to his positionality?
Right. So this is an interesting debate about what the United States should be doing with its military force and where.
Yeah.
So there's a big, and this is my colleagues in international relations talk a lot about this, right? What are the grand strategic types of the U.S. and what the United States would like to pursue as a grand strategy involves the military means, right? So there's a big debate in the Trump administration whether the United States should have, a more forward military position, or should refrain from, these military adventures, if you will, in other areas of the world. The exception is that grand strategically, and that's kind of a consensus in the grand strategy types of the United States, it's that Latin America, particularly the Caribbean, is kind of the core already. It's not a military adventure. So like it's one of those things where like the U.S. has always had military presence in this area, right? So the U.S. has a military command, Southcom, to deal with that area, right? It actually has two, because Northcom deal with part of it as well. So the two of the combatant commands of the U.S. deal directly with, kind of like its strategic environment, its immediate strategic environment, right? Now, President Trump may be trying to signal here that he's willing to use lethal force, right? To use military assets to pursue strategic goals, right? And that's consistent here with the views of the American public as well, that boots on the ground are not favorable. And other things that we have seen, so like the attacks on the boats, right, using drones or using other types of military assets. So those don't necessarily put troops there. It's one of those. It's relatively low cost from the U.S. perspective, putting aside the potential human rights violations and violation of international law that may be happening, because these are international waters. And the U.S. cannot destroy these civilian boats because it thinks there's suspects of people involved in the drug trade there, right? But what I believe the Trump administration is doing is trying to signal this kind of resolve, that the United States can use military force if necessary, and kind of playing like this brinksmanship too, right? To try to say, well, we'll go far with this. We will bring more and more military resources until you give up, right? The problem with these strategies of brinksmanship is that, they may fail because the other side doesn't know, and the other side may escalate. Right, or something may happen, or some actor who's not the command and control structures may break down. Something may happen, and all of a sudden you have a massive military conflict in your hands.
Yes. And it seems to me that if the two stated priorities, which we laid out earlier, are control drugs into the U.S. and overthrow the government, the brinksmanship might solve the first one, right? But less the second one.
Right. So there's concerns there. So one of them is that Venezuela is a transit country, but so far the bulk of the operations that took place, they take place in the Caribbean, which is a route for the drug trade organizations, but not towards the U.S. Right, so a lot of the drugs that are sent to the U.S. via Venezuela or even via Ecuador, they go through the Pacific. So if the goal was just that, they should be focusing their operations of drug interdiction, if you will, in the Pacific.
The Navy has started striking boats in the Caribbean Sea. Is this an effective way to stop drugs coming to the United States?
So the stated goal of the administration doing that is to try to interrupt drug trade routes that flow from South America to the United States, right? So the U.S. has, and the numbers may increase, but the U.S. has sent 10 warships, about 10,000 troops, personnel, and its largest aircraft carrier, the Gerald Ford. And it's been operating in basically striking these boats where the administration claims there are suspects of involvement in the drug trade.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is a departure from regular drug interdiction missions, which have existed no longer. The U.S. has done this, usually with the Coast Guard, but the Navy gets involved in this too, where the U.S. naval assets will stop those boats, search them, and seize whatever is illegal there, arrest people, and turn them to the authorities if necessary, right? Because this is a law enforcement activity essentially. Now, what's happening here is a departure from that, where because they are suspects, they're just going to be attacked by military assets, and these boats are going to be destroyed, and people will be killed in this process.
Wow.
Right? So people are calling this, essentially extrajudicial executions, right? Where there's not a lot of due process. It's also the case that there's not a lot of transparent information on what is happening. And that dates back to, the policies of the administration when it comes to transparency regarding military operations. So the U.S. has a way of covering military operations. It can have embedded journalists, or it can have that direct relationship between journalists and officials in the Pentagon or in the regional combatant commands, and that has been strained right now. So we don't really know. It's one of those things where we know when it happens, and then we try to figure out who was killed and why and where it happened. Most of these, if not all, if not most of them, have occurred in international waters. But they start happening, if these things start happening in territorial waters of a given country, then that's a clear invasion of sovereignty. Right?
Yeah. Is it likely that those are carrying drugs? Is that the normal drug route?
So these are normal drug routes. But one more thing should be said about drug routes is that the largest drug routes from South America to the United States, they go through the Pacific. Lots of boats, but also these makeshift submarines. And these actors get really sophisticated. They have lots of resources to do this, and they get sophisticated. And regularly they get boarded, they get caught. Every year, the number of seizures grows. U.S. authorities and other officials from other countries will keep pursuing those operations, right? Now, the bulk of the operations have been taking place in the Caribbean, and that route exists, but it's a route that goes from Venezuela, Ecuador, to the other Caribbean countries, and then eventually they'll go to Europe. That's where these drugs are headed.
Yeah.
Well, so if the purpose of these operations is purely drug interdiction to ramp up the efforts to stop drugs from coming to the United States, which is, I can see the concern, right? The U.S. has a drug problem, and the administration is signaling its commitment to it. But if the goal is that, then the focus should be on the Pacific, not on the Caribbean. In a way, the U.S. is kind of carrying out drug interdiction operations, ramped up drug interdiction operations, extrajudicial killings in a way, on behalf of European countries. Wow. Right? And then what we need to see as well is what takes place in these Caribbean countries and whether they support that.
Yeah.
Right? So one of them that seems to support the United States, and it's perhaps going to serve as a base of operations, is Trinidad and Tobago. Right? Trinidad and Tobago, it's a small country, has been dealing with issues of drugs as well. So there's been a rise in crime. So the government is worried about that, is trying to signal that domestically. And now, the U.S. is starting to park its naval assets in Trinidad and Tobago to start operations from there, taking Trinidad as an ally, right? But in a way, what we need to be concerned about this is it doesn't seem like it's just drugs, right? It seems like it's the administration bundling other kinds of strategic objectives in this, right? So it signals to the American population that the administration is doing something regarding drugs, regarding drug policy, and it's doing this kind of like the Trump way, right? So peace through strength, or using military assets to achieve policy goals. But it's also signaling to sectors of the society in the United States that it's committed to political change in Venezuela.
What's the likelihood that people in Venezuela will revolt against the Maduro government with the prompting of the US government?
So there's, in my classes, we talk a lot about what's called a revolutionary threshold, right? So like, what is the cost that your average protester who's gonna take to the streets? What's the average cost they're willing to pay, right? And authoritarian regimes have a very nasty way of increasing those costs, right? So like, not only you're being spied on, but if you take to the streets, there's brutal repression. In Venezuela, it's not the military that does it mostly; it's the Bolivarian National Guard, and those guys, that's their mission, right? To quell protests. So what is the cost for individuals to rise up?
Yeah.
Right, it's not without cost, and and it's one of those things to explain political change when it's bottom up, right? When people rise up, like what takes people to the streets, like what makes everybody think that the revolutionary threshold changed, right? That they're not going to get punished, that there's way too many of them. And that's the big concern there. That's why we talk a lot about the loyalty of security forces, right? So like, and usually how it happens, though there's lots of debate about this and the research is inconclusive, one thing that reduces the revolutionary threshold is when security forces signal that they're not going to repress, right? Or that not all of them are going to repress. So the military or the Bolivarian National Guard, in a certain area of the country, they decide to stay in the barracks.
Yeah.
They're not going to do it. In which case, then there's way too many people, and then repression becomes impossible.
Yeah.
And then the thing bubbles up, and there's and there's a political change process, which isn't guaranteed to become a democracy down the road. But the Arab Spring is here to tell us that, right?
Yeah.
But it's something that will oust the dictator that's been there for a long time, and then what's going to happen later becomes another concern. Down the road.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm an American historian, early American historian, and a similar argument's made about the American Revolution. Like how did the colonies get to the point where they believed that it wasn't too risky to rise up against the British government? And a similar argument that is made that they had to come to the point where they trusted that the other colonies would get their back, that this wasn't just a Massachusetts issue, but they could count on South Carolina also joining with them, and that they would have the breadth of force. So I think that that's probably another thing at play that we talked about before, right? Like who else besides Venezuelan opposition might get their back? Yeah,
right.
Interesting.
It has been the case that so far the security forces have sided squarely with Maduro regime.
Yeah.
Right. And it's one of those things. The Venezuelan opposition has failed over the years to co-opt effectively sectors of the military, to signal to them, some kind of commitment that they are not going to, that these officers who are involved, deeply involved in what's happening in the regime, are not going to be punished down the road. Right. And that's the greatest, like, why do militaries depart the ruling coalition of an authoritarian government? Oftentimes it's, if they are able to secure for themselves some protections. We're not going to get punished. We're going to go back to the barracks. It's going to be, business as usual. And you all civilians, you take care of this.
Yeah.
And we'll support the new administration and this and that. So a lot of these transitions happen like that.
Right? Protections from whom? Who would the military have to know was going to protect them?
Oh, yeah. So one of the main concerns about democratic transitions, is what do you do with the people who were involved in repression? Right? So the big term about this is transitional justice. So like, some countries are going to choose to do truth commissions where everybody comes up and they won't get punished as long as they tell the truth about what happened, and it's truth and reconciliation. But other
Yes.
countries, I mean, the big example in Latin America is Argentina, right? Argentina was able to successfully punish its military officers, the military officers who were involved in the repression during the proceso,
Yeah.
right? And that becomes a mark, right? Where it's like, when you see generals being put in prison for human rights violations that they committed during the military regime, then that creates. So that's something that officers are always afraid when they are involved in military in any dictatorship. It's like, well, what's going to happen to us down the road?
Right.
Are we going to get punished? The other thing is, are we going to have a military down the road, right? Because some political elites may decide then, well, if this is what happens, right? If we have a military that should be protecting the people and defending the country against external threats, but instead we have a military that seeks to repress, seeks to join coalitions with these authoritarian sectors in society, then it might as well not have them.
Right.
Right, so that's the big concern there. Where it's the military. It's a separate sector of the society because they have a very special place, right? They are bureaucrats who can administer violence, right? It's a very special profession, and it gives them a very special set of interests when these processes are taking place.
Before we wrap up, Dr. Acácio, I'd love to know, for students who want to find you, where they can take more classes with you. What do you teach?
Right. So I teach a number of classes where the topics that we talked about would be discussed. I teach the core comparative politics class. It's a political science 330, politics in nation states. So there's all sorts of debates there about authoritarianism, democratic backsliding, the role of the military, development. So all the basics that would take for people to grasp these issues. And I also teach political science 437, which is Latin American politics, where we can drill down on issues specific to the region of Latin America. And finally, there are two classes that I'm creating in the future where these issues are also going to be discussed. There's a class on violence in Latin America, which is Political Science 457, and a class on armed forces and politics, which is Political Science 455. So those would be, where most of these issues would be discussed, both in terms of the empirics of it, like what's happening and where it's happened before, and the latest scholarship on the issues, but also the theories, like why does this thing happen? What should we expect? And under which conditions do these events take place?
You also are involved with Dr. Owen Holmes in putting on the Royce Symposium, which is where I got really interested in these issues. Will you tell folks about that?
Yes. So the Royce Symposium is a unique opportunity for the students who are interested in international affairs, comparative politics, so everything that doesn't have to do specifically with U.S. politics, to get engaged with debate. So it happens every year. It's hosted always at the Nixon Library. It's a beautiful place. And there's panels, student panels, where students are able to submit their papers, get feedback. We discuss some things. There's always a keynote. And of course, there's always the presence of Congressman Ed Royce, who, for the longest time in the US Congress, was involved directly in the making of foreign policy. So it's always in the Royce Symposium always has the concern to bring in specialists, academics, people like me, but to also bring in policymakers, people who have done this, who have pursued different agendas in foreign policy on behalf of different governments. So, and the students get to see that live and get to interact with people, get to dress up.
Mm-hmm.
and get to really benefit from a discussion that looks outward, that looks, that takes in consideration, of course, domestic politics and everything else, but that looks outward.
Yeah, I have to say, it really is one of my favorite events of the year. I learn so
It's
much
very
every year at
cool.
the Roy Symposium. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Acasio, thank you so much for being here with us. This was really enlightening and really, really a pleasure. And I can't wait till we get to talk again.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.